back here on the show. It's me, Hugh. I'm just doing it this time because Sandra's, even though she's sitting in the big chair over there. Oh, yeah, we better say hi to Ernest. Ernest is tuning in from Ottawa.
Hi, Ernest.
Hello, Ernest. I remember Ernest.
Do you? He still calls all the time. He's our number one.
We love Ernest.
Number one listener of that channel for 10 years in a row.
What's up, Ernest?
What's up, Ernest?
All right. So listen, let's get right down to business here because we got a lot of great stuff to talk about. We got Chris-lambe here, and we got Antonin here, and I'm not sure where to say you guys are from. I know Chris is involved in a number of different things. Comer
a little bit here and there now.
The Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform.
Was doing Youth Vote.
Youth Vote
Canada, but now we're actually going to dissolve that and create something new. We're going to see what comes out of that.
Okay.
But yeah, before everything and anything, I was definitely Occupy Toronto brought me to social justice issues.
That's how we know each other, I think.
Yeah.
So Occupy Toronto is still alive.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I think the idea has always been there. It didn't have a name before. It has one now. I think the symbols and some of the language that we introduced is still present today.
So the movement is still alive?
As much as it ever was, I would say. Yeah, sure.
So the movement never wasn't, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's more what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, the movement never wasn't. I like that.
Yeah.
And that's, by the way, Antonin joining us here
from
Occupy. And so we're going to talk about some of these issues. Where do you want to start, guys? I mean, there's so much. As you said, Antonin, Occupy being a concept that we got to make some changes somehow.
Yeah.
Right? Things can't continue. There's too much.
Well, we have to be assertive about those things, right? It's starting to become clear that, writing letters is not working, waving placards is not working. You see it with Black Lives Matter, you saw it with I Don't Know More, you see it with Occupy, you see everybody comes out, they do their best, they try to illustrate their issues, and they get nothing in exchange. And I think people are starting to get fed up with that. It's hard to be nonviolent protesters as we are, and just to keep that going every day because the frustrations are so real, and you just see it time and time again, and people with power are not interested in addressing these issues. You mentioned the Comer lawsuit. This is a thing that has been going on since 25 years to get a legitimate lawsuit about the Bank of Canada before federal judges.
Can we just briefly explain what the Comer lawsuit is by starting out with what is Comer?
I'll do that one if you want.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so as far as we can tell, Comer is a group of now septuagenarians led by a woman called Ann Emmett, who is one of the sweetest, most hardcore activists you can meet in Toronto and is also 84 years old. And so they started a suit against the Bank of Canada centered around some very important language that is in the Bank of Canada Act. And that has to do with where finance ministers get loans for public infrastructure projects. So the line in the Bank of Canada Act is finance ministers may obtain loans from the Bank of Canada. It's significant because a loan that the government obtains from the Bank of Canada is at 1% or 1.5%, maybe 2%. A loan that the government obtains from a commercial bank is going to be at 6 or 7 or 8%, depending on the economy at that time.
Now, commercial bank is one of the big chartered banks,
your
right?
CIBCs, your RBCs. There's only 4 here, so they're easy to keep track of.
Could be foreign banks.
Or could be foreign. We don't really know, right?
Okay.
And so we find ourselves in the situation now where the majority of our deficit is interest payments on money we've already spent. More than 50% of our national deficit is interest payments, and that comes simply from the compound interest, which is the difference between a 1 or 2% loan from the Bank of Canada and a 6 or 7% loan from a commercial bank.
And the other point is, even at 1 or 2%, a lower rate, that money would be returned to the Bank of Canada, which is owned by the Canadian people.
Okay, so here's
putting
the
aside
thing.
the civics issues and the accountability
well,
issues.
that was my question. First of all, Comer stands for Committee on Money and Economic Reform.
Monetary.
On Monetary and Economic Reform.
Yes.
So my first question would be, why in the heck would anybody borrow money from a commercial bank instead of going to the Bank of Canada?
Well, that's the question we all have, and apparently it takes 25 years to get that answer, and a really great lawyer.
That's a lawsuit. Why does it even have to take a lawyer to ask that? It's a bad business decision.
We camped in a park to get an answer similar to that, and apparently that's not effective. So hopefully Rocco Galati and the Comer group, can do it that legit way. I don't hold out super great hope for the Just Us system, but apparently others do, and I hope that they find remedy that way.
The Just Us system. That's very appropriate.
That's all it is. Right? It's hard to call it anything else.
Well, so that's one big issue, but a very important issue, and I'm really glad to see.
So are we moving along in it?
Yeah.
They make progress every 6 to 12 months when they go in.
Every 12 months there's a lawsuit, and it moves to the next step. And if they win, the government always appeals, and it goes back and forth that way. And now it pretty much has started right from the beginning again. because they went through the entire process, got to the Ontario Superior Court, I guess it would be, and they pretty much were asked to redraft certain elements of their
they dropped
statement
some
of
of the
claim.
more contentious claims that
Yes.
have to do, I think, with
So
more. We talked about the
conspiracy
accountability
charges.
of it, and they're more just focused on this question of why are you taking loans
Wait,
from
I
commercial
want to
banks?
say something here, Sandra, to bring this home to you, because Paul Hellyer, who I know you know,
That's right.
because you guys were in a film together, when he's not talking about aliens and UFOs, he's talking about monetary reform.
And he would have an inside track,
He was.
right?
I went to the first Comer hearing down here on Queen Street, the courthouse down there, and Paul Hellyer was there. That's where I met him for the first time.
Paul Hellyer shows up to all of them.
Yeah.
all
He's
the
always
corners.
there. Like his last book was The Money Mafia. So
Yes,
it touched
yes.
a lot on the economic issues and a lot of his elements of economic reform. I think he got elected when he was like 22. But that's what he got elected on, was on monetary reform. That was like one of his
right.
big
He
his
told
big
me that
platforms.
that's why he got into politics, because he grew up in the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And when he asked the hard question, what's causing this economic malaise, the answer to fix it was monetary reform.
Yeah.
And back then we had the Social Credit Party in Canada, which was all about just looking at the monetary system differently too.
I don't know how deep that level of monetary reform has to be. When I look at how simple the Comer group's demands are, in essence, to answer that important question about may versus should, it seems to me like even if we just resolve that part of it, we'd already be so far along. Putting aside whether we return to non-fiat currencies or however we restructure our money supply.
So clearly, if it's taken this long, okay, Paul was 22 at the time. I think he's 92 now. This lady, Anne, may not live to see.
We're going to be back next week is how I interpret that. It's going to take successive generations of people to keep...
Okay, but it seems to me, guys, that it's not even about what the right thing here to do is they're trying to find ways of avoiding doing the obvious, which is the right thing. So maybe that's what we need to look at, as opposed to, okay, we already know it's a no-brainer.
Well, how are you going to do that? What are you going to do?
This is, I think, what's taking so long, is trying to figure out how do you bust the system when the system has the complete control over you. It's great to have this peaceful protest. That's awesome. You guys can do that all you want. But guess what? Not going to do anything.
Well, because the thing is, too, they don't teach people in schools about how the monetary system works.
Or anything. They don't even teach you how to file a tax return, and this is presumably one of your most important responsibilities as an individual in an organized society. They couldn't take 3 hours out of the 3 years I spent in formal schooling to teach me a couple of these basic things, how to manage a checkbook.
How to budget. How to
I'd like to think I
budget.
learned those things on my own, but nonetheless, it would be nice to have some formation in that. And you could clearly see there are people in our society who are struggling with those very things, right?
Mm-hmm. Education in general, I think, is how you begin to move forward. People don't know what the problem is; they're never going to be able to actually, go up against it. So it's a lot about teaching people how we used to create money and how prosperous the country was, and that's why we were so able to create the Great St. Lawrence Seaway, the Canadian highways, a lot of the infrastructure that's built up. It's all because at that time we were actually creating our money supply through the Bank of Canada at these low interest rates.
Which was the healthy power of the people for the people.
Yeah, you could employ the people.
Yeah.
You could move towards full employment. And right now the situation
And this system worked really great until apparently in 1974, Trudeau 1 went and signed over our interest at the Basel Conference, I think is how
the
it
Basel
works.
Committee with the IMF.
Yeah, the Basel Committee where the IMF was formed. And if I'm not mistaken, he regretted it almost immediately after. I think by 1983, he was already making comments against it. What I personally find ironic is I know that people have asked Justin Trudeau 2, about monetary reform and banking reform, to which he seems to reply, I don't believe in conspiracy theories.
Well, I thought I even heard he said, Basel III's okay.
Yeah,
It's you know what? It's hard to get someone to believe in a conspiracy theory if you're benefiting from it.
well, they seem to benefit hand over foot. The
And
banks
so why
definitely...
would they say anything then, Antonin, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if you're a have, you're not going to want to be
You're not
joining the
gonna give away the
have-nots.
game.
It's
Exactly.
also a matter of ignorance on behalf of the politicians, because you have to think every 4 years, more than 70% of all the politicians are new.
It's a high churn rate.
Yeah, it's truly a high turnover rate in this business, right? So they can never tackle so many issues or all these issues. What we really need is a good lobbyist kind of group like Comer to go around, create a package, and be able to actually educate the individuals who are coming in every time they come in. Like, we just had an election. Every single person that is in Parliament now should have a package in front of them that explains
That's a great
the
idea.
history of the issue and how it benefited us then and how it can benefit us now. You have our dollar like totally going to the tank right now.
Yes.
And you have yesterday you had Stephen Pulaski come out and say we're going to keep the interest rates at the same at 0.5%, and we're looking for alternative methods in order to like deal with our economic crisis. The alternative method is right there in the Bank of Canada Act. It's Section 18I and J. It's we create our money. In a capitalist society, money is power. And if we're leasing that out to private banks,
and paying
how
5%
democratic are we?
Wait a
being?
second. So if you know this, and I know this,
We're just
and it makes
hippies.
sense.
That's
but
the
okay, but I'm sure you can't tell me that they don't know this.
They don't.
That they're choosing not to do this.
I'm with Sandra on this one personally. I think they know when they choose to ignore it. I think you're more forgiving.
I'm more forgiving because I've walked
too
into
nice.
the room.
You're just too nice.
The thing is, I'm walking into rooms with politicians from doing youth vote stuff. I used to be really cynical and against the system and jaded against the system, and then I tried to like engage it to see, am I being? This is optimistic, Chris, because I began asking the questions even of the NDP members like Andrew Cash, and he's like, I've never heard of this issue. And it's like, that's pretty interesting considering it used to be a platform of the NDP.
Plus, it's the most important issue.
And it's the most
All
important
the
issue.
other problems could be solved with monetary reform.
And so we asked, he's like, give me a history on it. Like, create a lobbying package for me to go and present in front of our committees so that we can deal with this issue. The thing is, politicians don't do the work themselves. The people have to do the work and present it to them. We have to be a part of the system. It's participation.
How do you do that if you're busy working yourself? How do you
figure
do
out
that?
a way. You create a GoFundMe and you donate to the Comer campaign. I don't know. I don't know exactly.
So
but
how do people like Anne and Rocco Galati, who's the lawyer, how long has he been on this case now?
I think he replaced the previous lawyer who had passed or retired, and I think Rocco replaced him in the early 90s, maybe.
You mean
I
this
don't know the
case has been going on
specifics.
that long?
I don't want to speak for Rocco or for Anne. You know, I have too much respect for them. But,
But a long
I think
time.
he's been at it
Generally
a long time. Yeah,
Okay, so
absolutely.
how do you keep going? How do you keep doing this
I don't know
and not get discouraged?
When we talk about the legal system, I don't have the wherewithal to go do what Rocco Galati does because I would just get too frustrated and storm
Exactly,
out. Right?
exactly.
So I'm glad he's doing it, and I'm glad that he has the patience, and I'm glad lots of people, Christopher, have the patience to do these things in different ways. I just think we need a diversity of tactics at this point, and I think we have to explore many other things. Taking public space is an important and recurring tactic that we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
when teamed with trying to have the conversations with politicians at the same time. Like Mika White says from Occupy
If you
Wall
say
Street.
so. I mean,
I think
don't-
it's important, and it works in tandem. I think that's why protests don't work as well as they used to. It's because back in the day, in like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the individuals who were outside of those buildings, of Parliament, whatever else, represented a demographic that was going to go and elect or unelect the individuals in that building.
Well, let's-
whereas now we have a large portion of individuals who do the protesting who also don't represent a majority of the electorate.
Well, here-
they actually don't vote.
They have no power. In other
Yeah.
words, too, they have no.
So their word is not respected because those individuals, that 100 people, that 1,000 people who are outside of that building, don't represent votes. And at the end of the day,
Okay.
that's the power that the people
Right.
hold. And because we're so cynical about the system, the same individuals who care and know so much about what's going on and what the problems aren't the same people who are necessarily going and voting. And once we actually pick up that voting, again, I'm not saying it's the be-all, end-all, but it's a tool that that has been provided by us from other people who used to protest to get that vote, right?
Right,
So we need to
right.
respect them and respect ourselves by using that tool and coupling it with our ability to go out on the streets, take space, get angry, make a ruckus.
Yeah.
But we have to be representing an electorate base.
So do we need to change our voting structure? First past the post and
Well,
all. Are we
definitely.
When
Yeah.
was the last time you got to vote for the person you actually liked instead of the asshole who's not
I
going
have
fuck
to
it the
tell
worst?
you,
Pardon my
every
language, right?
single time I vote, it's about who I
getting a little
don't want,
repetitive.
not who I do want.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Okay,
Oh,
guys,
that's
so listen,
sad.
let's just take it in another little, maybe different direction so we know the monetary situation needs to
I
be
want to
fixed.
add one thing because we were talking about who deserves blame in this. Certainly as the public deserves some blame, the politicians may be uninformed or they may be malicious. Here's a group that fascinates me, though, is the media. Now, you people are clever. The collective you of the media is very clever.
He's blaming you, Hugh.
By this guy right here is the reason. Collectively, how come the Ottawa Press Gallery doesn't rally and get this one question answered? It's a very basic, give it to us in a
And
paragraph.
that's not even a
Why are
business
you?
major or anything, but just business sense. If it's 2% interest versus
Yeah.
6% interest,
And none of them seem to stick with
we
this.
know the
They-
reason for that. There's too much concentration of ownership of the media. everybody that works for those companies is scared they're going to get fired if they.
That's true.
Look what happened to
I have
Conrad
some sympathy
Black.
for them.
Everybody in that hierarchy has been approved by the guy that likes you because you're not making waves.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you've identified it exactly. So.
Even those in the media can fall out because look at Conrad Black.
Well, they get canned all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The shit
Well, they're crabs in a
disturbing-
pot, right? Like that's.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Definitely.
And when you keep unemployment as high as it is, real unemployment, everybody's desperate for not getting fired or. Something.
CBC has long been known for. It stands for Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, but a lot of people say it stands for Controlled by Canada.
Mm-hmm. I actually have had an epiphany in the last 2 or 3 years where I actually think the CBC is the best kind of possible method. It's a weird time to come out and say that, but I look at these corporate entities. I have a lot of respect for other ones. It's important to me that these media corporations, like you said, we have a conglomerateization. But when we look at some media entities, even like Toronto Star, they're kind of an island. They don't have international commitments in the way that like Vice or Rupert Murdoch's, Byzantine business empires, they don't have those links. So I think something like the CBC, where you just have an insulated structure, we pay our licensing fee, I pay my $25 a year for news, and that's that, it gets done. They once a year, them and the government have a discussion about how big the check is, and then that's the only time they're friendly, and then back to work. Separate and
one
distinct.
thing about having the CBC is the fact that if all the other private media are getting bought up by who knows, nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows.
At least
exactly.
the CBC is owned by the government.
Right.
But
and
if the
people of
government
Canada.
itself is
And even
corrupt,
if all their media outlets get bought up by one person, at least you got the CBC
always have
as
that
an
dissenting
alternative.
voice. It might be crappy. The shows might be lower production quality. These things allegedly have happened in the past. I love the CBC, but at least it's there. Almost as a fail-safe. You can consume whatever media you want in great economic times, but when the shit hits the fan, you're going to need an actual media that's going to tell you the truth. And I feel like the CBC and maybe a few others are isolated.
Well, and just for people out there,
that channel would be the place I tune in.
Well, thank you. But there's people out there that don't like the CBC. There's a certain bunch of people like the CBC, a certain bunch don't. But I just want to say to the ones who don't, the thing is, if you privatize the CBC, what's going to happen? They're going to get bought up by somebody else that probably
By John
already
Tory and
owns a bunch
Rogers.
of
I mean,
networks,
the same
right?
people who buy up everything. Bell and Rogers, who at the very least used to be distinct companies and are now
But guys,
like buddies
Yeah.
on
wait a
everything.
second, though. Okay, but here we are saying the CBC is run by the Canadian government, correct? Okay, and here we are challenging the Canadian government on the monetary reform.
Well, I don't agree with the principle that the CBC is run by the Canadian government. I think
Okay.
the CBC is paid and the staffing costs are covered by the government and us, the people. And then I would say an independent group who take their responsibilities of varying degrees of seriousness actually administer the CBC on a day-to-day basis. Clearly, you can see, like with Jian Ghomeshi and some other things, sometimes they fail. Fail bad. But nonetheless, I think that kind of separate and distinct. In the same way that we fund, I don't know. I can't think of too many other examples of that nature. But I really do. I think that's the best model. You have private ones who compete with a public one, and in that way always keep each other. Because at the end of the day, even the most private media corporation in the world, is City Pulse or whatever the crap channels are, they get away with a lot because they rely on protecting the public interest. And so if you're going to do that, that's noble. But we need one who actually does it all the time, 24/7.
You can't even. City TV used to be an example. When Moses Znaimer ran it and was independent, now it is bought up by
terrible.
whoever,
It's
Rogers
garbage.
or CTV, I can't remember, but they're not the City TV that used to be.
Yeah.
But okay, so maybe
throwaway
CBC
news.
is the better of the best of the worst, but you still have a lot of opportunity for corruption. As long as, to your point, Chris, if we could actually vote those people in, and their salary and their roles were dependent on the public, and as opposed to however it works now, which is not the public, even though they're supposed to be speaking for the public. It's no different to me than a political party, the CBC, which you have all kinds of issues in there. And I do think that they're given a lot of leeway and they get special treatment because of who they are.
I can't disagree with your analysis. Somebody like Peter Mansbridge clearly is treated with kitty gloves by everybody. You're talking about one of the most corrupt talking heads out there.
He's a Bilderberger. attendee.
Is he really?
Yeah.
He's a Bilderberger, maybe. I don't know, but
He is, for sure.
yeah. Well, to know and to see his exploits, on the one hand, delivering Canada's most, authoritative news broadcast, on the other hand, taking money to give oil speeches, those things are inconsistent,
Yes,
Peter.
correct,
You cannot do that. And I think
yes.
hypervigilance is what is required. That's why I like to see guys like Jesse Brown just out there busting CBC's balls every day. Keep them on their toes. They have to be kept on their toes, because otherwise you'll see the same largesse that
Yes,
maybe you see in
yes.
government or other places.
Yes.
It will take over there. So I feel like in our climate now, where they're in competition with private companies who do this strictly for money, I feel like it keeps them accountable in both ways. They won't be prone to excessive bureaucracy because they have to stay competitive with the market, but they can still be funded and not have that pressure of the free market on them all the time.
But
right?
at the same time, like what you're talking about with corruption, it would be the appointments of the executive board. So the appointments of the executive board of the Conservatives on the CBC have been Conservatives. So over that time, you've seen a bunch of cuts in the funding that CBC's been getting, and you have like this I know a few people that work at the CBC, and they're saying, like, since the Conservatives have taken over and they've been appointing these kind of like conservative-minded individuals at the board, a lot of the decisions of like how, if they're able to move forward on certain news stories, have been axed from the very top, which has created a really, really toxic
we saw that
environment.
with Amanda Lang, I think. Right?
Yeah.
That happened.
Yeah, it's happened across the board. Plenty of times that didn't get reported on. So you created this like really toxic environment now in the CBC, where a lot of the individuals with great ideas, who are a little bit more progressive in the tone that they'd like to take their news stories and their editorials, are now actually leaving and going to the private companies because they're actually given more freedom there than they were at the CBC, which is actually like kind of when you can't completely defund an organization. When a government can't defund an organization because the people would be against them, that's how they go and try to
they'll trickle it, right?
They trickle it. They tear it down from the inside. They create an environment where individuals who are of like-minded to them or the opposite of their mind are going to go and jump ship.
Only the yes people get ahead, and it's super competitive. Nobody can say no to their boss.
This is why we need alternative media.
Necessarily.
Right. This is why we need things like that channel. And alternative media that really is about the people, that's really
absolutely.
run by the people, for the people. That's the what a true media is supposed to be.
I think we need to reinvent money,
Government?
reinvent media, and reinvent government.
Yes, yeah, and I think
I
Paul
mean,
Helmy
really,
would agree with all of
because you
that.
talk about, people look at stuff, we got to reform the system, reform. And then other people say, no, that you can't really do that. There's too much, you're fighting momentum, right? You got to start with something fresh, because when that old system collapses, you want to have something in place.
Well, I ask myself that question every day, because that really is the question that faces all of us. Do you reform what we have, or do you just say
reinvent.
screw it and you start again? I'm neutral and 50-50 on both. I can't. It's hard to say reform.
I like
it's easier
reform.
Yeah. All right.
I like to take what we've already fought for and got to. That's the one thing I think people tend to overlook, is that what we have now is because people have fought to have what we have. Once upon a time, we didn't have a choice. We didn't have a vote. We didn't have a lot of these things. So we need to be taking a look at it's kind of like my theory of 1,000 years or 2,000 years. You have all these religions that pop up that fix problems because they're really just ideas from either an individual or a conscious group of individuals that solve a lot of the problems of that time. But then 1,000 years later, you're faced with all the issues that either they forgot about or they created by creating the solutions to the problems, right? And that's what we have to realize, is we're constantly regenerating and evolving. So we got to look at what we have, what works. Let's kind of tweak it, move it forward. Now, what is completely not even addressed in the system that we have, or the ways in which we're organizing ourselves? And that's where you create the new. And you kind of like a Lego block, you add it on.
But how can you do that, Chris, if they're not receptive to
Who's
that?
they?
Well, hold on, hold on.
Where are they?
I think there are examples of what Sandra is describing and what you're describing, which is when you look at a movement like Anonymous, this is a whole new way to do activism, where you take your battle directly to the assholes who are doing it to you, and you tamper with their electronic goods, which to me is, as a nonviolent person, is a perfectly acceptable tactic, since it does not involve violence,
Now,
right?
he's not a part. Antonin is not a part.
I am
of
not a member of the
Anonymous.
Anonymous group. I just want to put that out there. But I don't really have a problem with them putting their nasty logos on your website, because maybe you deserved it. So I think there are new paradigms.
Madison people, where are we?
And one important thing to say is this concept of Anonymous has spread to people like wildfire. It means anti-bullying now. It means standing up for people.
Yes.
It means things that the original Anonymous never really might have intended, but it has grown to this thing, and people embrace it like crazy, more than Occupy, more than anything else. people really embrace that ideology.
It's true. That's a very good point.
And so I think there is paradigms for those new ways to do it. But always, I like doing it in the street and doing it for real. You know what I mean? I like defacing websites, but I also like, showing up and putting chalk on your building.
So what are you working on these days? We don't have too much time left, guys. And we'd love to have you back and carry this conversation on.
We reminisce a lot about time in the park.
It's got to be more than that, though. It's got to be.
We have exactly these discussions that we're having now on your show every day with each other, and we run into people all the time. The best part about Occupy Toronto, I cannot walk the street without, I will meet 3 people that I met at Occupy Toronto. So, those discussions happen every day, and if they're not called Occupy or they are called Occupy, it doesn't really make a difference to us. So we just... we plod along. We see things that we like. We see activism that we like. We try to help out, sometimes as followers, sometimes as leaders, sometimes as third parties who just cheerlead for others. It's very important to give people support. I remember how touching it was when we were in the park, to even just have a kind word on social media or somebody send you a care package or whatever. It's that will keep you going for another 100 days. So it's important to be that person when you're sitting at home, maybe not doing as much as you could do, or you have work and other things, right?
Yes.
So little messages of solidarity and sharing information and amplifying signals, I think, is important.
What about the big picture, Antonin?
Yeah.
How are we going to...
Worldwide revolutionary order, Hugh.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how we get there.
Take
if you've
down
got
those
ideas,
Bilderbergs.
I've got an email address, but I don't know. I just think it's going to be... it's going to be difficult.
Ask
we'll
Peter
get there.
Mansbridge to invite you to the next Bilderberg meeting.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen.
The next what? Bilderberg? All right.
We can go with Alex Jones.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Did he get in there? Oh, yeah.
Well, he got to the front
I think people get to the
door.
gates, right? And then
to the
everything is
gates. Even
shuttered
got
off.
to the
You can't take
gates.
pictures and all that other fun stuff. Okay, I think your producer's going to play us out on a clip. I just wanted to talk briefly about that.
Is he got Alex Jones going, "You globalists are trash"?
It's not quite Alex Jones. It's not quite on that level, but important nonetheless. He made a movie called "What World Are You Living In?"
Who did?
I believe it's Doug Hatlin. Is that his name? And it's just about people's experiences with police violence, which I think is very topical.
We didn't even get to that.
Well, next time, Hugh.
Another reason to come back.
Okay, we're going to keep talking.
Yeah?
We're going to keep talking.
All right, so let's talk about police for a second. We had this week, the deputy police chief dropped a bomb. He basically called the police budget bloated, that it needs to be cut. He suggested that we could drop 500 officers right away today and save ourselves tens of millions of dollars. I like police to an extent, but I can't be living in a city where the 1% mayor would rather give the police assault rifles than feed the 63% of kids who are starving in Regent Park. That's not acceptable.
Especially in a city that has no escalating
We have no
violence.
fucking crime. Let's call it what it is, Hugh. Go look at Chicago and look at Toronto and then tell me we need more police than they do.
We
just don't.
Tickets.
We
They don't even do that. They don't even, Sandra. If they were creating revenue, for the city, I'd be fine with them. But they don't, right? So, I like police, but enough is enough.
I don't want to be giving Toronto money. Sorry.
No, the whole thing about the police too. It's like the attitude. Like in the old days, they wore blue. Now they wear black.
Yeah.
Right.
They're super militarized.
Well, it used to be peace officer. Now it's police officer.
Look, they have spent all this time creating a community policing unit, which basically is indistinguishable from any other police. When you see them at events, they'll be at community centers when you're doing a community dinner, and they'll be there in their bulletproof shit that says police across the front. And it's like, how is any person who comes in here, how am I supposed to interpret that? I can only interpret that to mean you think I'm trying to kill you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not going to go very far with the community. You look like a jackass.
Yeah.
We're in these buildings every day. I'm on the street every day, motherfucker. I don't wear a vest. I don't carry a gun. And I have somehow made it for 38 years. Yet here you are, the scaredest guy out here wearing your full military battle regalia, like everybody going to try to kill you. Ain't nobody trying to kill police. That's just not a thing that happens. The only people who are going to kill police are doing it already, and they're mobsters and they're organized, and you're taking food out of their mouths. But none of us out here is planning to harm police. Nobody plans that stuff. So, cut it out with that bullshit. Sorry.
It is the militarization of the police.
I hear a rap
Right?
coming. I hear a rap coming.
I already heard it.
Hugh?
I don't do rap. Well, actually, I do, but I'm not going to do it right now.
Next week we'll freestyle with you.
Awesome.
We got
Freestyle
stuff
with you.
I'll do a tambourine in the background.
There you go. That's perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, guys, do we want to give out any contact info for
Not
you
really.
guys? Or come on, the revolution
You know
has
who
to
we
be.
are. We're in the streets every day. Come
Because
see
you know
us.
who's going to be
You know?
contacting you, Antonin, now, right?
Well, I feel like I should say hi to CSIS and all those guys. Thanks for following me around. It's cool. Appreciate all your interest in our movement. So,
Yeah.
thanks.
It's a lot easier with C51. So
Yeah,
Oh, I would have loved to have talked about that.
us too.
Well, you know what? We'd like to support this kind of conversation all the time here at that channel. So hopefully we'll get you guys back and
For sure.
carry this on a regular basis.
Perfect.
Okay. All right.
Can't say we're not passionate about it, eh?
Yeah, well,
I think that's it for the show, Sandra.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Hugh, for allowing me to sit in this chair. It's been so interesting. You know what? I could get used to this.
Well, but I wanted to, kind of kick you.
I know. I saw that.
Couple of
I saw
times.
that. I saw that.
So we'll have to set
are we
up something
preventing
where I can do
workplace
that.
abuse here? Because we can leave if you want.
It's a very friendly little kick. So anyway, that's it for a Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow
Tomorrow.
for more Liquid Lunch right here at thatchannel.com.
We as a society have made decisions about class, and that if you're wealthy enough, you can get away with almost anything, and if you're poor enough, you can't.
I was called a faggot, a drunken Indian. I've never been assaulted like that before.
How are you, sir? Can you spare a smile?
Because when we call the police, way too often, it makes the situation much, much worse.
I know all about those places. I used to get thrown down the stairs at 52 Division.
When they strip searched me, when they give me back my clothes, they give me back only my underwear. I had no top, I was topless, no t-shirt, nothing, and they left me like that until they released me in the morning. So they left me for over 12 hours like that.
The cop just turned around, took the pepper spray, and sprayed my eyes. I could not see or nothing. I was burned for 2 days.
In the 4 years before the G20, Toronto police killed 7 people. In the 4 years after, they've killed 20. It's impunity. They got away with it. They got away with it on a massive scale.
Assault back?
Yeah.
No. There are other options.
What world do you
This-
live in?